welcome back to Kobayashi Island. We're going to start this episode off a little differently. If you haven't seen the things leading up to this episode, I would suggest going back and checking out some of the previous videos, because we're going to start off here with the future expansion beyond this point and what the kind of overarching goals are going to be and how the train networks are going to be. So far we have the downtown, which got built in episode 7 till now. The old town, that was episodes 2 through 6. This farmland residential area that will eventually happen, kind of mix the two. Harbor industrial area, which will probably happen before that because it's pretty needed at this point, and a big old airport. So those are kind of the main big types of areas that are going to be happening. Through Old Town, there'll be lines that kind of go to each. Through Downtown, there'll be lines that kind of go through each, and then there's going to be a mountain pass area that's just going to have the road and the train lines that connect up to all three as well. So now I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit and look at the specific plans for what's going to happen with downtown. I'm thinking that there's going to be sort of a few distinct areas within the downtown that are still going to come, and train lines will kind of exit out of the central station into these specific areas of downtown. There's going to be kind of a media district. Think Times Square or Shibuya Crossing. There's going to be a financial district with a lot of skyscrapers. That'll be kind of the accent of the downtown. And then this big old area on the left, which I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do with. I'm thinking there might be a college there, might be a stadium, and then a mountain pass that kind of connects you over to the harbor and the airport as sort of a shortcut to downtown. Let's zoom in here and kind of talk specifically about the rail lines. So there's already 4 rail lines that connect from the central station and go over the bridge and go to the old town, and that'll be one set of rails that go to the rest of the harbor and the airport. There'll be another one that comes out of the central station and goes just to the media district and dead ends there. I'm thinking another 2 that go to the financial district, and the reason I have them separated on opposite sides of the train station is so that one of these lines that come from Old Town will go to the financial district, and a line that comes from the other direction will go to the financial district. So there'll be 2 opposite sides of the map. We'll kind of both have a line that ends up in the financial district, because that's sort of, I think, going to be where the most people are trying to get to, since it'll have the biggest buildings. On the top of the central station, there'll be another line that goes back. There already is another line that goes back to the old town and the harbor, and there's sort of a loop that happens there. There'll be 2 lines that kind of go from the central station to the mountain pass, and that'll go to the harbor and the airport. And then another 2 lines that go to this sort of undecided area. So that's sort of how the central station breaks down in terms of which lines go where. So hopefully that was a little informative in terms of my crazy train lines that have been popping up, and it's kind of difficult, I'd imagine, to tell where they might be going. But I think this will serve as a good sort of guide going forward in terms of generally the areas of the city that are going to be expanded upon, and the lines that already exist, how they'll service each of those areas. So let's get into the rest of the episode. So I know I said last episode that I would work on this area that's kind of attached to downtown, but sort of around the corner, kind of pinned between the mountain and this river. And I sort of got sidetracked this episode, and I put some roads down for it, and I think a train station, but I didn't really end up building any buildings there, because the more I sort of thought about it, the more I was kind of getting stumped with what to do with this area. It ended up being much easier to focus on the area next to Old Town, kind of across the river from here, and we'll see what ends up happening. But this area is sort of weird to me, because it's like connected to downtown, but it's also like its own sort of mini peninsula because of the river on one side and the mountain on the other. It's really like a small secluded area. Felt weird to kind of have downtown stretch over there when it's becoming really rural on the other side of the river. I'm almost thinking that this should be just terraformed completely different over here. Maybe it's like the river becomes like a canyon and there's much larger hills on either side of it, or the lake is a lot bigger and hugs the mountain, and this is all just turned into water or something. I'm not totally sure yet what, but what I ended up focusing on this episode is this area across the river. I was feeling like this sort of backside of the old town might be kind of like a little seedier and sort of lower land value as opposed to downtown or the part of Old Town that's closer to the beach. And so I put down an oil area over here, and I did it in sort of an unorthodox way where I know, in the game you're supposed to have oil areas look a certain way, but I didn't really feel like this island, geographically for where it is in the world, would really have like oil wells all over the place. I mean, it wouldn't really have oil at all, but I feel like for sure it wouldn't have like oil derricks and like big open areas that have oil wells. I'm imagining like, There Will Be Blood or something where, there's just oil wells all over the place. So what I did here was how they deal with it in Los Angeles. I know they make these sort of large buildings that house oil rigs inside of it because LA has a lot of oil in the ground around it, but it's also a city, so they don't want oil rigs all over the place. So they sort of make these weird looking windowless buildings, and they put the oil wells inside the buildings to kind of hide them from the general public. So that's sort of what I'm imagining this building here is an oil well that is inside of a building. They're pumping out of it, and they put it in these sort of smaller 50, 100, 200 gallon barrels and ship it out like that in trucks. And then I'm placing down a storage and a processing plant for the oil wells. The processing I also put inside of a building, kind of hide it. And I think that's sort of what I'm going to do with a lot of this area is kind of have it functioning as an oil area, but it maybe looks just more like a generic industrial area to kind of hide the ugliness of it. For the ore areas and the forestry areas and the farming areas, that's something I would more imagine to be in a place like Kobayashi Island. Those things, make more sense in the region, I'd imagine. Especially farming, I have a pretty good idea of how I want these farming areas to look, and I think so those other areas that aren't the oil areas, I'm definitely planning on having look like the types of areas that they are. For the ore, I'm thinking maybe like a mine somewhere, and for the forestry, a couple places where the trees get chopped down, and for the farming, what I'm imagining is kind of like residential and farms mixed together, really hodgepodge. I'll probably pull up Google Maps when I do that episode and show some specific places that are like this. So one of the things you saw me place down was sort of like this amazing cell tower building. It's like a telecom company building, and that one I put another ore processing plant inside of. It's one of the larger processing plants. Sorry, not ore, oil processing plant. And it's a good one because that particular plant has like a metal post sticking out of it, similar to the top of the cell tower building. And so I think they blend nicely together. What I'm doing now is kind of detailing up this river. I'm imagining that at this point, a little bit higher up the river, it becomes pretty natural. And in this area, that means pretty lush. So placing down a lot of rocks and a lot of trees and a lot of grass and swamp grass and things like that. That's sort of one of the other reasons why I want this area next to downtown to kind of be different than what I was imagining last episode. Because when I put down this kind of rocky, grassy area next to the river, it didn't make sense to me to make downtown kind of stretch that way and have dense buildings and stuff. I think that needs to become much more naturey and green really quick once you get out of downtown. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. I just placed down the oil barracks building, kind of the one that gives the boost to the oil industry but looks like a house. And I'm gonna pair it with this other actual residential apartment building that I think looks pretty similar, and have this sort of be like a very low income housing area over here. So this will be kind of like the people who work at the oil industry might live over here. I don't think this is a particularly nice area over here, even though it is next to the river. I think it's more of a kind of little strip in between the river and an industrial area. So how nice can it really be, you know? So over here next to the cell tower, I'm putting down another warehouse. This one is also gonna hide some oil derricks and some petroleum or plastics specific warehouse in it, so kind of store materials as well as produce them. So this will be really like one of the main buildings producing and dealing with the oil products in the city. You can see me there putting in the storage. And I'm actually doing it on both sides there, plastics on one and oil on the other one, and then sort of like detailing up, or at least covering with plants, a lot of the areas under the freeways here. I think that tends to look a lot better when you have some greenery near the freeways, because that's kind of how it is in real life, you know. Usually next to the freeways it's not very well gardened or anything, and then, you know, the ground kind of is able to do what it wants and turn into you know, green spaces and the weeds and bushes and whatnot. So that's what I'm doing there. So I'm about to go to the workshop and restart the game and get a new asset. What I decided to get was a underground train station. If you remember in the episode with the Imperial Palace, I set up a lot of the network stuff for the downtown. And one of those things was I placed a train station kind of deep underground to serve as an underground train station without actually having an underground train station asset. And in sort of playing around with that and trying to figure out the best way to do it, I was just like, this is way too much hassle for what it's worth. It's only, you know, one mod to solve this problem, to get just one train station that actually is underground. So I just went ahead and did it. I did end up kind of doing a little bit more industry and a few apartment buildings and things around this freeway here, specifically industry buildings underneath the freeway. So this area isn't completely going to be destroyed, but I think it'll just be drastically smaller than what I was kind of planning on last episode. You see me there place down the underground train station underneath the other train station that's already there for a different line. I think this particular little area underneath the freeway here ends up turning out really cool. I placed another storage building here, like part of the industry DLC storage, and I set it so that it specializes in unique goods, which I think will help the downtown, having a couple storage facilities in different parts of downtown that distribute commercial goods to the commercial areas, which, you know, is downtown. I'm going to do this in a couple more spots around, maybe on the other side of downtown, having like a couple unique product storage sites. So obviously this is my first YouTube series for City Skylines, and this is sort of the first time I've decided to record what I was doing, mainly because I thought that this would be a particularly fun city to watch get built, and I felt like, you know, maybe I had a few things to offer to people who haven't been playing the game quite so long. But feel free to you know, let me know if there's any things that, you know, I could be doing better to make these videos better. These videos are for you guys, so feel free to comment. And that's it for this episode. Next episode, we'll be dealing with that area, so look forward to that.